If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. Official beginnings. The secret campaign against dissent. In a quiet building in Washington, D.C., something strange began in 1956. J. Edgar Hoover sat behind his massive desk, signing papers that would change America forever. He called it COINTELPRO. 4 simple letters that hid a dark secret. The FBI director had grown worried. Communist groups were meeting in basements across the country. They were talking, planning, organizing. Hoover decided they needed to be stopped. But how do you fight people who haven't broken any laws yet? The answer came in whispers and shadows. Agents started showing up at Communist Party meetings as new members. They smiled, shook hands, and took notes. Nobody suspected these friendly faces were reporting back to headquarters every night. But watching wasn't enough. The FBI began playing tricks that would make a magician jealous. They wrote fake letters using Communist Party letterhead. They created stories for newspapers that weren't true. They called the tax office about people they didn't like. Picture this: a communist leader opens his mail to find angry letters from his own supporters. Except he never wrote anything to upset them. The FBI had forged his signature and sent lies in his name. Friendships crumbled. Trust vanished like smoke. The strangest part? Nobody was really in charge of stopping these games. Hoover gave his agents simple orders: disrupt the enemy. How they did it was up to them. No rules, no limits, no questions asked. Agents became creative in frightening ways. They sent anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. They spread rumors at dinner parties. They even convinced the government to audit people's taxes over and over until they gave up fighting. Each success made them bolder. If fake letters worked against communists, why not use them against other groups too? If surveillance helped them understand their targets, why not watch even more people? The template was set, a blueprint for secret warfare against American citizens. But here's what nobody knew back then. This was just the beginning. The techniques perfected on communist groups would soon spread like wildfire to civil rights leaders, anti-war protesters, and anyone else who dared to speak against the government. In those early days of 1956, as agents learned their craft in the shadows, a question hung in the air like morning fog. If the FBI could secretly destroy one group of Americans, what would stop them from destroying others? The answer would come soon enough, written in the broken lives of people who never saw the danger coming. Expanding targets, unmasking the war on civil rights. The year was 1963, and something dark was stirring in the halls of power. A young minister named Martin Luther King Jr. had just delivered his famous dream speech to hundreds of thousands in Washington. The crowd cheered. The nation watched. But hidden eyes were also watching, taking notes, making plans. Deep inside FBI headquarters, agents sat at metal desks, surrounded by towers of files. They weren't tracking foreign spies anymore. Their new targets walked American streets, carried American dreams, and fought for American freedoms. The mission had changed. The watchers had turned their gaze inward. Dr. King's phone rang at all hours. He picked up to hear silence, then a click. His hotel rooms felt different somehow. Papers moved when he wasn't looking. Letters arrived that made him question friends he'd trusted for years. Someone was playing games with his mind, and they were very good at it. The Black Panthers in Oakland noticed strange things too. Members would arrive at meetings to find police waiting outside, even though no one had called them. secret plans leaked to newspapers before they could act on them. Friends suddenly turned cold, whispering about betrayals that never happened. FBI agents created fake letters signed with familiar names. They wrote poison words designed to make allies fight each other. Brothers who had marched together started seeing enemies in familiar faces. The civil rights movement began eating itself from the inside out. In Birmingham, activists found their phones tapped. In Chicago, peaceful organizers faced mysterious arrests on charges that later disappeared. Evidence appeared that seemed real but felt wrong. Witnesses told stories that didn't quite match what others remembered seeing. The most chilling part wasn't what happened in daylight. It was what occurred in shadows. Activists died in ways that raised questions no one wanted to ask. Car accidents happened at convenient times. Heart attacks struck healthy young men who had made too much noise. J. Edgar Hoover kept thick files on every civil rights leader. He knew their habits, their fears, their secrets. He used this knowledge like a weapon, striking when they were weakest, attacking what they loved most. Years later, when some of these files became public, Americans discovered the truth. Their own government had waged war against citizens who simply wanted equal rights. The evidence was there in black and white, typed on official letterhead, signed by men sworn to protect the Constitution. But many questions remain unanswered. How many deaths were really accidents? Which evidence was real and which was planted? Who else knew what was happening, and why didn't they speak up? The ghosts of COINTELPRO still walk among us, whispering secrets that powerful people hope will stay buried forever. Turning point: the 1971 media office burglary and public exposure. The night of March 8, 1971, changed everything. While America sat glued to television screens, watching Muhammad Ali face Joe Frazier in the boxing match of the century, 8 ordinary citizens quietly broke into a small FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania. These were not professional thieves. They were activists, teachers, and concerned citizens who called themselves the Citizens, commissioned to investigate the FBI. They had watched friends disappear. They had seen peaceful protesters beaten. They knew something dark was happening, but they needed proof. The office sat empty that Monday evening. Security was light. Most agents were probably watching the fight too. The group worked quickly, methodically copying every document they could find. What they discovered would shake the nation to its core. Boxes of files revealed a chilling truth. The FBI had been running secret operations against American citizens for years. They found detailed plans to destroy civil rights groups from within. Letters showed how agents planted fake stories in newspapers. Reports described how they turned friends against each other with lies and rumors. One document stood out among the rest. It bore a strange code name that few had ever heard before: COINTELPRO. This single word would soon become synonymous with government betrayal. The activists made copies of everything. Then, they mailed the documents to major newspapers across the country. The Washington Post, the New York Times, and others received thick envelopes filled with classified secrets. Most editors hesitated. These were explosive claims. Could they trust anonymous sources? Was this real, or some elaborate hoax? The risk of publishing classified government documents was enormous. But the Washington Post took the leap. On March 24, 1971, reporter Betty Metzger published the first story. The headline was simple, but its impact was earth-shattering. The FBI had been spying on ordinary Americans who dared to speak out. Phone calls flooded newsrooms. Activists who had suspected they were being watched suddenly had proof. Lawyers demanded answers. Congress members called for investigations. The whispers that had circulated in activist circles for years were now front-page news. The The documents revealed techniques that seemed borrowed from spy novels. Agents created false identities to infiltrate groups. They spread rumors to cause splits between organizations. They even encouraged violence to discredit peaceful movements. Most disturbing was the scope. The program targeted not just radical groups, but mainstream civil rights organizations, anti-war protesters, and even some members of Congress. Anyone who questioned government policy became a potential target. The burglary in media had done more than expose secrets. It had proven that a democracy could spy on its own people with the same methods used against foreign enemies. The line between protecting national security and crushing dissent had completely disappeared. The contested legacy, congressional hearings, and lasting mysteries. The Senate doors closed behind them, but the secrets stayed locked inside. Senator Frank Church led a committee that promised answers. They called it the Church Committee. For months in 1975, they dug through FBI files like archaeologists searching for buried truth. What they found shocked even seasoned politicians. Thousands of pages revealed a web of surveillance that reached into every corner of American life. The FBI had watched civil rights leaders, anti-war protesters, and ordinary citizens. They had planted informants in churches, schools, and community centers. But something strange happened as the investigation deepened. Files went missing. Documents arrived with thick, black lines covering crucial information. Entire sections had been blacked out, leaving only fragments of sentences that raised more questions than they answered. Redacted became the most common word in the evidence. Lawyers for the Socialist Workers' Party fought in court for years. They wanted to see their own files. When they finally got them, whole pages looked like abstract art. Black rectangles where names and dates should have been. The Black Panthers filed similar lawsuits. They received boxes of papers that told only part of their story. Fred Hampton's family asked the hardest questions of all. Their son, a young Black Panther leader, had died in a police raid in Chicago. Was it really just a shootout, as officials claimed? Or had the FBI planned his death? The documents they received were so heavily censored that answers remained hidden in those black bars. Each redacted line created a new mystery. What had the government done that was too dangerous to reveal, even decades later? Families of other activists found similar gaps in their loved ones' files. The pattern was disturbing. Important details always seemed to vanish right before tragic events. The Church Committee's final report was damning, but incomplete. They condemned COINTELPRO and promised it would never happen again. Yet activists noticed something troubling. Phone calls still had strange clicking sounds. Mail arrived late or looked tampered with. Were these old habits, or had the surveillance simply gone deeper underground? Today, lawyers still fight for complete files. Freedom of Information Act requests come back with pages that look more like Swiss cheese than government documents. The FBI insists these redactions protect national security and ongoing investigations. But which investigations? And protecting security from whom? The questions multiply like shadows at dusk. If COINTELPRO truly ended in 1971, why do so many documents from that era remain classified? What secrets could be so dangerous that they must stay hidden 50 years later? In courtrooms and congressional hearings, officials speak of closure and accountability. Yet the blackened pages suggest a different story. One where the most important chapters remain unwritten, waiting in locked vaults for readers who may never come. Shadows that never leave. Unfinished questions and modern claims. The files kept coming, even decades later. A researcher would submit a simple request. Months would pass. Then a manila envelope would arrive with pages so heavily blacked out they looked like abstract art. The few visible words raised more questions than answers. Something strange happened in the 1990s. Former agents started talking. Some whispered about operations that never officially existed. Others mentioned code names that appeared in no government records. A secretary remembered typing reports about groups she had never heard of before or since. The paper trail went cold in curious places. Documents from certain years simply vanished. Other files showed clear signs of tampering. Pages were missing. Entire sections had been carefully removed with surgical precision. Modern activists began noticing familiar patterns. Phone calls that echoed strangely, cars that appeared too often in rearview mirrors, meeting places that somehow became known to people who should not have known. The methods felt both old and new. Technology changed everything and nothing. Digital surveillance replaced wiretaps. Social media monitoring took the place of human informants. Yet the basic approach remained the same. Watch, record, disrupt when necessary. Former targets shared their stories in hushed tones. They spoke of friends who turned out to be informants, of romantic relationships that existed only to gather intelligence, of provocateurs who pushed peaceful groups toward violence. The betrayals cut deep and never fully healed. Government officials denied everything with practiced ease. They claimed COINTELPRO ended completely in 1971. Any similarities to modern operations were purely coincidental. But the denials felt hollow to those who lived through the original program. New names surfaced in leaked documents. Operations with different titles but familiar goals. The organizational charts showed different departments handling similar work. Critics argued the program never truly ended. It simply moved offices and changed letterhead. Journalists kept digging. They found connections that officials insisted did not exist. They traced funding streams through multiple agencies. They documented techniques that bridged decades of supposed reform. The most troubling discoveries involved unresolved deaths, activists who died in suspicious circumstances, witnesses who disappeared before they could testify, medical examiners whose conclusions raised more questions than they answered. Each new revelation sparked fresh investigations. Congressional hearings produced careful statements and qualified apologies. Reform committees made recommendations that sounded impressive on paper. Yet the core questions remained unanswered. Who really gave the orders? How deep did the network extend? What operations continue today under different names? The silence from official channels only fed public suspicion. The mystery persisted because trust, once broken, proves nearly impossible to rebuild. Every denial felt like confirmation. Every reform looked like window dressing. The shadows cast by COINTELPRO stretched far into the future, darkening conversations about freedom, dissent, and the price of challenging power.